2001 Toyota Sienna XLE. Hey mom, listen, I know you don't like minivans, but just hear me out here. There's this place in Georgetown, Kentucky, and they make this Camry-like earth pigment containing iron oxide and manganese oxide, and it weighs less than 2 tons, and you can get extra large everything, and Renaissance captain chairs, and third row seating, and it's got good fuel economy. Just check it out. Thanks, mom. 2001 Toyota Sienna XLE, the official car for people who experience atelophobia, the fear of imperfection, or not being good enough, an extreme fear of failing to achieve perfection in any of one's actions, ideas, or beliefs. Because unfortunately, life happens, and oftentimes in life, we find ourselves making choices that face more consequences than a person makes when they gamble with things like spilling the beans, or breaking the hearts of relatives who call you things like a freak or a monster. If anybody calls you either of those things, unless that's what you identify yourself as, just give them the one finger salute and step inside your spaceship of intergalactic adventures to the UNESCO World Heritage Site in Tuscany, Italy. The Toyota Sienna is a minivan manufactured by Toyota at the Toyota Motor Manufacturing Indiana facility in Princeton, Indiana, United States for the North American market. It replaced the first generation Previa van in 1997 with a more conventional front-wheel drive layout and shares a heavily revised platform with the Camry because it's 1997 and Toyota was just coming out of the bubble of the 1990s, and after a number of successful boardroom meeting number crunching discussions about how to take the heartland of America, the Sienna was born. Both the Previa and original Sienna were smaller than the other minivans they competed against, but a redesign in 2003 for the 2004 model year increased the dimensions to match many of those of its competitors. The Sienna is the currently only minivan in its class to offer all-wheel drive, but the first generation XL10 model was only offered as a front-engine, front-wheel drive vehicle, and it was only offered with one engine option and 4 speeds of A5040E automatic transmissions with the 6 cents. The sole power plant to this first generation Toyota Sienna is the 3-liter 1MZ-FE V6 that has aluminum blocks and heads, featuring dual overhead camshafts and variable valve timing with intelligence. Ooh, sounds so fancy. This engine has a 60-degree V6 design and features multi-port fuel injection, 4 valves per cylinder, a one-piece cast camshaft, and a cast aluminum intake manifold, and cast aluminum pistons with an anti-friction resin coating, and valve depressions that decrease the chance of valve-to-piston interference in case of timing belt failure on motors without VVTi. And it also uses steel rings, smaller diameter shot pin rods, and a forged crankshaft. And what that all equates to in 2001 is 210 horsepower and 210 foot-pounds of torque. And oh yeah, we've got electronic throttle control, and Toyota Racing Development offers a bolt-on TRD supercharger kit, good for gains and urges to eat roast beef of Arby's assistant managers. I don't believe a supercharged Toyota Sienna exists, but if so, please send me that unicorn to review. Horsepower ratings for this van dropped after the Society of Automotive Engineers implemented a new power measurement system for vehicle engines. Toyota engines rated at 87 octane gasoline dropped the most, compared to the same engines used by Lexus rated on 91 octane. It has bucket tappets and was designed for good fuel economy without an overall performance trade-off. These engines are prone to oil sludge, and there was a class action lawsuit about that, so it's highly recommended you change the oil on these vans on a regular basis. The Toyota Sienna was available in 3 trim levels, CE, LE, and XLE, and the LE and XLE models were equipped with second-row captain's chairs, while the CE models came equipped with a second-row 2-passenger bench seat. The seats can be easily folded individually removed as needed for more room for activities. For the 2001 model year, the Sienna underwent a mid-cycle refresh, and this update included a facelift to both the front and rear fascias, which added a redesigned front grille and bumper, along with revised rear taillights sporting a more modern appearance. Toyota also revamped the center console for more usability to the HVAC controls, along with new locations for accessory switches like rear vents, power sliding doors, or heated seats. You could even have the two-tone paint on the Sienna because it's 2001 and we just survived Y2K and the bubble economy in the 90s, sponsored by Clinton's Bush, and the Olympics, and all things that are categorized in different generation names like millennials. Except you won't find many millennials driving this because it's a minivan, for fuck's sake. 2001 Toyota Sienna XLE, the official car for the type of man who enjoys floating down the river after smoking a bowl with his coworker and enjoys relaxing on an inner tube for less than the price of a 4 for $4 meal from Wendy's. Toyota Sienna, a chariot from the gates of hell met by Bambi after the collision with a 1999 Volvo S70, resulting in the destruction of a man's future endeavors into the inner dimensions of an introvert's alternative realities, and the bearer of many breads brought to you by the souls of honest Christian men. Listen, I may not be the son of a preacher boy, but I know a thing or two about honesty and genuine compassion for a fellow human, and the types of people that drive these cars are ones of interesting backstories into trying to get their next big break in life after being screwed over for so long. The emotion closely related to that is known as a gastopia, which is an admiration of a particular part of someone's body, whether it is those objects of circulatory orbitals into the universes of other human beings, or the labium orises of fluidic lines that show expressions ranging from dudgeon to pleasure to good spirits to euphoria to iridescence to traitor to kihi to dullion, all sorts of emotions, and the shape of a large people mover comforts the bodies and souls of celestial beings enough to want to incorporate a minivan into their lives. 2001 Toyota Sienna, a car for the person who experiences delirium after the equivalents to 6 cups of coffee and having a conversation with a gentleman that suffers from dementia. The Toyota Sienna is a minivan that caters to seventh heaven and the sanctity of exuberance felt after looking into the ocean blue and white instrument cluster, and upon running your fingers across the logic control deck and scan between 97.1 The River and Power 100.1 Athens, Georgia, you listen to the words of people expressing hopefulness and peace of mind and prosperity, and you begin to understand your inherent oculism and the exhilaration of a head rush after listening to the sounds of San Francisco by the global DJs. 2001 Toyota Sienna, driven by the likes of men who grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, a time period in America where cocaine was king and the next wave of synthesized electrified space-age music was blasting at the dance floor of Magic City in Atlanta. And oh shit, no, this isn't the 70s, 80s, or 90s, this is the early 2000s. 2001 Toyota Sienna, sponsored by Big Daddy Bush, and enough Dick Cheney to go around for another round of brewskis. 2001 Toyota Sienna, the official car for middle-aged men whose favorite NASCAR driver was Dale Earnhardt Sr., and upon his passing into the quantum universe, he knows Dale Jr. is not the prodigy his father had hoped to be. Listen, for all you people out there considered Gen Xers or baby boomers, here is a message from a younger person's perspective about the time period we currently live in. In today's world, we live in a society of postmodernistic romanticism. Okay, what does that mean exactly? Postmodern romanticism, or in literature commonly known as literary modernism, is a time period born out of the 19th and 20th centuries and is characterized by a self-conscious break with traditional ways of writing in both poetry and praise fiction. This literary movement was driven by a conscious desire to overturn traditional models of representation and express the new sensibilities of their time. Whether it's an article on Yahoo News, or a subreddit discussion about the mental stability of human nature, or even this car review, all of these forms of information make up postmodern romanticism. Not to directly quote Alan Watts here, but advice? I don't have advice. Stop aspiring and start writing. If you're writing, you're a writer. Write like you're a goddamn death row inmate and the governor is out of the country and there's no chance for a pardon. Write like you're clinging on to the edge of a cliff, white knuckles, and your last breath, and you've just got one last thing to say, like you're a bird flying over us and you can see everything, and please, for God's sake, tell us something that will save us from ourselves. Take a deep breath and tell us your deepest, darkest secret so we can wipe our brow and know that we are not alone. Write like you have a message from the king, or don't. Who knows? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who doesn't have to. Look, Jesus Christ knew he was God, so wake up and find out eventually who you really are. In our culture, of course, they'll say you're crazy and you're blasphemous, and they'll either put you in jail or in a nut house, which is pretty much the same thing. However, if you wake up in India and tell your friends and relations, my goodness, I've just discovered that I'm God, they'll laugh and say, oh, congratulations, at last you found out. The art of living is neither careless drifting on the one hand, nor fearful clinging to the past on the other. It consists in being sensitive to each moment and regarding it as utterly new and unique, and having the mind open and wholly receptive. We are living in a culture entirely hypnotized by the illusion of time, in which the so-called present moment is felt as nothing but an infinitesimal hairline between an all-powerfully causative past and an absorbently important future. We have no present. Our consciousness is almost completely preoccupied with memory and expectation. We do not realize that there never was, is, nor will be any other experience other than the present experience. We are therefore out of touch with reality, and we confuse the world as we talked about, described, and measured with the world which actually is. We are sick with a fascination for the useful tools of names and numbers, of symbols, signs, conceptions, and ideas, and what we have forgotten is that thoughts and words are conventions, and that is fatal to take conventions too seriously. A convention is a social convenience, as, for example, money. But it is absurd to take money too seriously, to confuse it with real wealth, in somewhat the same way as thoughts, ideas, and words are coins for real things. And people get all fouled up because they want the world to have meaning, as if it were words, and as if you had a meaning, as if you were a mere word, as if you were something that could be looked up in a dictionary. Well, newsflash, you are meaning. And while all of this philosophy is a bit much for a minivan car review, what I'm really saying is that you don't need to do anything, because if you see yourself in the correct way, you are all as much an extraordinary phenomenon of nature as trees, clouds, the patterns in running water, the flickering of fire, the arrangement of the stars, and the form of a galaxy. You are all just like that, and there is nothing wrong with you at all. We seldom realize, for example, that our most private thoughts and emotions are not actually our own, for we as humans think in terms of languages and images which we do not invent, but which are given to us by our society. We copy emotional reactions from our parents, learning from them that excrement is supposed to have a disgusting smell, and that vomiting is supposed to be an unpleasant sensation. The dread of death is also learned from their anxieties about sickness and from their attitudes to funerals and corpses. Our social environment has this power just because we do not exist apart from a society. Society is our extended mind and body, and yet the very society from which the individual is inseparable is using its whole irresistible force to persuade the individual that he is indeed separate. Society as we know it, therefore, is playing a game with self-contradictory rules. Just as true humor is laughter at oneself, true humanity is knowledge of oneself. And the knowledge of the man that drives this 2001 Toyota Sienna is no exception to that cardinal rule in life. The individual that drives this minivan has probably accumulated more enlightenment from the jubilation of freedom felt after spending nearly a decade into the equivalents of Dante's Inferno, and living with the hateful ugliness that other humans have, all for some misunderstanding of bad life choices that opened up into a world of blessings from life's little inconveniences. Those little inconveniences reciprocated into a life sponsored by souls of old school individuals, and the nourishment of knowledge given by over 30 years of history, and to the ups and downs of living in a college town like Athens, Georgia. Even though society can be cruel and sick and twisted, society often doesn't recognize real when it sees it. The individual who owns this van is a beautiful soul, filled with more empathy and love than the tips of ink written onto the sheet of paper in the backroom lair of the sanctuary of J. Chariot on, Sienna, as we continue our life journey as we ended up in Texas. Have a blessed day, guys. The end.